Variation is found in human populations and in other populations, such as this population of island beetles. Color in these beetles is determined by different versions of a gene, different alleles. Green is the dominant trait, so green beetles have two green alleles, or a green allele and a brown allele. Brown beetles have two brown alleles. By counting the brown alleles and green alleles, we can calculate that this population has 30% brown alleles and 70% green alleles. The frequency of brown alleles is greater than the frequency of brown beetles because some green beetles have a brown allele. Allele frequencies change as populations evolve. What causes populations to evolve? The island is suffering from a drought, and in this dry environment, brown beetles are better camouflaged than green beetles. Birds are more likely to see and eat green beetles. Over time, brown beetles survive and reproduce more than green beetles. This is an example of natural selection. Individuals with inherited traits better suited to their environment survive and produce more offspring than other individuals. Here, natural selection causes the frequency of the brown allele to increase. Through natural selection, the population has become better adapted to its new environment. Genetic drift occurs when populations evolve due to chance events. Let's see how genetic drift affects this small population of beetles. Chance constantly affects which beetles actually reproduce and which of their alleles they pass on. In a small population, chance events produce large fluctuations in allele frequencies from one generation to the next. Here, the frequency of the brown allele has decreased to 0, and the population is left with only green beetles. Genetic drift also occurs in large populations. But in a large population, genetic drift has less effect because it causes much smaller fluctuations in allele frequencies. Other random events can also lead to genetic drift. By chance, this volcano kills more brown beetles than green beetles, causing the frequency of the green allele to increase. Gene flow describes evolution due to individuals moving into or out of a population. When green and brown beetles migrate into the all-green population, the frequency of the brown allele increases. Natural selection, genetic drift, and gene flow are the major mechanisms responsible for the evolution of all populations. Together, they shape populations of beetles as well as humans.
Alright, so walking through each of these mechanisms that can disrupt Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. Alright, so each of these are situations where the conditions of Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium are not met. Alright, so here, natural selection. So here you have a bird preying on beetles. Alright, the green beetles stand out more than the tan or brown beetles. And so the green beetles, more of them are eaten out of a population. Alright, so that means that if they weren't able to reproduce, those alleles don't get passed on to the next generation. So that means you're left over with a smaller population of green beetles and more tan beetles. Well, those tan beetles are going to be the ones that are going to be the ones majority of the time mating. So you expect over time more of the tan and brown beetles to be more predominant in the population, because the green beetles are being selected against. Mutations. So let's say that you have a mutation that causes the bright green color of the exoskeleton of the beetle to change to brown. Alright, so here you'd have more over time, more brown beetles in the population due to a mutation. Gene flow. Here you have individuals coming into a population, or individuals leaving a population. Alright, so that means that you have alleles coming in, and you have alleles leaving the population. Alright, so this is a way that some new alleles can be introduced into a population. Now, those alleles could be beneficial, those alleles could be deleterious. Okay? Here, for example, let's say that the brown allele is recessive. Let's say the green allele is dominant. Alright, so we'll make this green. Alright, we'll make this brown. Now since we have these tan beetles, let's say that they are based on their genotype that are homozygous recessive. Okay? And they're coming into this population of beetles. Now let's say, hypothetically, let's say that all these beetles in the population are homozygous dominant. Okay? So here, as a result of this, you're bringing in a B allele. Alright, so that means that as a result of these two individuals mating in that population, you end up with offspring that are heterozygous. Okay, so again, still, you have green beetles. But let's say that you have two heterozygous green beetles that cross. Alright, now you end up with beetles that are green, 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 some brown. Alright, so after one or two generations, you can end up with new phenotypes showing up in a population. Alright, so this idea of non-random mating, alright, implying sexual selection. Alright, so here you have random mating. For instance, this brown beetle, every other beetle of the opposite sex has an equal opportunity of mating. Okay? In non-random mating, or sexual selection, alright, the beetle is preferential to certain phenotypes in the other beetle. In this case, one of the other brown beetles. Alright, prefers to mate with the brown beetle as opposed to the light brown or cream colored beetle. Alright, so one of the other mechanisms driving evolution is genetic drift. Alright, so genetic drift has a larger effect on smaller populations than larger ones, because it has to do with the random chance events that wind up eliminating, reducing allele frequencies in a population. And so it makes sense that if you're reducing or changing the allele frequencies in a population that's small, alright, the effects are going to be much larger than if you had a larger population size. Okay? So here you're talking about chance events. Alright? Lightning storms. Alright? Catches a forest on fire. So you're eliminating individuals in a population. You could be eliminating population of flowers, population of beetles, population of rabbits. You can have some disease that runs rampant in a population that reduces the allele frequency. Alright, so these are catastrophic, devastating chance events that reduce the population allele frequency. Alright, so here, for example, by chance, an individual could step on the green beetles, right? So that those alleles don't get passed on to the next generation. Alright, this is purely random. So over time, you see as a result of the green allele being eliminated from the population, all right, the brown or tan allele and phenotype becomes more predominant. All right, so let's look at an example of genetic drift. All right, so here we have a population of flowers. Now the population of these wildflowers, all right, the red allele has a frequency of 0.7, the white allele is at a frequency of 0.3. Okay, so here, all of the highlighted flowers, they're able to produce offspring. All the ones that aren't highlighted don't. Okay, so here, these 5 leave offspring. Now, you can see as a result of this, all right, the frequency for the red allele and a white allele becomes 0.5. So after one generation, the frequency has already changed. All right, so you see the population structure changing in terms of the frequency of alleles. All right, and these 2 highlighted flowers are the only ones that are left to reproduce. All the other ones are eliminated. Let's say they die out. Someone stomps on all the flowers except for these 2. They survive. All right, so they produce offspring. Now, all of those offspring have red flowers. All right, so here, after 3 generations, the allele frequency has become what we call fixed. All right, so here, the frequency is at 1. All right, so you're set at the red allele being 100% or 1. And so you've eliminated the white allele from the population. All right, so you have lost the white allele. All right, it's been removed from the population. All right, the red allele is fixed. All right, so this population of flowers has evolved. It has changed over time. One of the special cases involving genetic drift is something called the founder effect. All right, so let's say you have a population of beetles on the mainland. Let's say that there's one of these beetles, or a couple of these beetles, they get on a boat, all right, they find their way into a boat, all right, not that they're taking a ride on a boat, all right, and they end up on an island, all right. That small population of beetles from the mainland becomes the founders, all right, the initial starting population on the island. All right, so the alleles that you have in these beetles are the ones that are going to, in effect, be passed on to future generations. All right, so any possible defects, any mutations, all right, any diseases that have a genetic component we pass on to future generations. They'll be more predominant. So if you were to compare this population to the original mainland population, you're going to be seeing striking differences. The bottleneck effect. Here, your original population, you have some catastrophic event that reduces the population size to very small numbers. So as a result, all right, this is purely random, again, you have reduced the population allele frequency to only a few individuals. All right, so you've lost a whole lot of genetic diversity. All right, so again, here this population is more susceptible to any form of genetic drift because it's really small and there's not a lot of genetic diversity. So as a result, you know, something else would come along and wipe out the rest of the individuals in that population that survived, and now that population is no more. All right, so we kind of hit the highlights of genetic drift. It's significant in small populations. Alright? The changes that you see are due to random chance, alright, in terms of allele frequencies. This can lead to the loss of genetic variation within a population. And here, you have the potential for harmful alleles to become fixed in a population, particularly when you're talking about the founder effect. So let's look at a case study involving genetic drift. Alright, so here we have prairie chickens, and looking at the loss of the habitat for the prairie chicken, and how this has changed the population structure of the greater prairie chickens in Illinois. Alright, so here you're looking at, in Illinois, for the prairie chickens, you're looking at their range in green. So this is pre-bottleneck. Post-bottleneck, when you start disrupting their habitat and reducing their range due to farming or whatever other effects that have reduced the population number. Okay. You can see that the range of the prairie chicken is greatly reduced, significantly reduced from 1820 to 1993. Okay. And here you can see the population structure. Alright. Initially, pre-bottleneck, you had between 1,000 to 25,000 prairie chickens. Alright. In 1993, that got reduced to less than 50. Okay. So for these prairie chickens, prior to the bottleneck, for each loci they examined, alright, for the prairie chickens, they had 5 alleles for each locus. Alright. But after this bottleneck, they only had 3. Alright, so here, since you're losing alleles, alright, due to this bottleneck effect, you are losing genetic diversity. Okay. Also look at the reproductive success of these birds. Alright. Prior to the bottleneck, alright, 93% of the eggs hatched that they laid. Now, less than 50%. Alright, so this is not a healthy population. Now, if you compare that to Kansas and Nebraska in 1998, where there was no bottleneck, the population size is much larger. Okay, and they have comparable number of alleles per loci to the pre-bottleneck Illinois population, as well as a really high reproductive success in comparison. Alright, so you can look at the effects that genetic drift can have on a population in this case study. Gene flow. Alright, like I said before, it's all about individuals coming into and moving out of a population. They're bringing new alleles in, alright, and those individuals that leave, those alleles are leaving the population. Now, here, let's say we have population A and we have population B. Now let's say the individuals from A migrate to B and individuals from B migrate to A. Alright. Over time, alright, these two distinct populations will no longer look like they did before. Alright. They'll kind of mix and mingle. Alright, this new population, alright, as you have alleles moving in between these two populations, they become so mixed, right, they resemble one another. They look the same over time if you have gene flow. Alright, that's what's meant by reducing variation. Alright, so here, gene flow can decrease the fitness of a population. So looking at another example, you have the great-tit Parsus major bird on the Dutch island of Zeeland. Alright. Here, you have two populations. You have a central and you have an eastern population on the island. And they interbreed. You have gene flow. But you have immigration of birds from the mainland introducing new alleles. Okay? And typically here, birds born in the central region exhibit a much higher immigration of birds from the mainland than the eastern population. Alright, you can see that birds from the central region have a lower fitness compared to those from the eastern population. Alright, so here, looking at that example, alright, you have the eastern population of birds and central population. And over here, we have the mainland. Okay? And you have individuals from the central population migrating into the eastern. Okay? You have individuals from the main
Imagine that we can see mutations happening, shown here by yellow flashes. Mutation can change a red allele into a green one, or a green allele into a red one. In this scenario, mutations slightly increase the proportion of red alleles in the gene pool, and thus red phenotypes in the next generation. Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium requires that all individuals in a population be equal in their abilities to survive and reproduce. This condition is probably never met, because individuals vary and some variants leave more offspring than others. This differential reproductive success is called natural selection. Natural selection increases the frequencies of some alleles and phenotypes and decreases the frequencies of others. Watch the birds preying on the insects. How will predation affect the genetic structure of the next generation and the evolution of the insects? The birds could see the red insects more easily against the background, so they caught a disproportionate number of the red bugs. This reduced the frequency of the red alleles in the gene pool, increased the frequency of green alleles, and similarly altered the relative numbers of green and red individuals in the population. Over time, this process of natural selection adapts a population to its environment. Under pressure of predation, the insects are becoming more and more green,